Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rita Hokinson, and I was born in July 1939 in England, and war broke out between England and Germany in August 1939. So the first 5 years, 6 years of my life was during World War II.
What things did you not have during that time?
Well, we were on rationing, which means all the food that was in the country, you had to line up for it and you used the ration book and you paid with little coupons out of your ration book. And I was 12 years old when I first saw a banana. And all during the war years, sweets, which you call candy, was all on rationing. And I was 12 years old or older before we were able to get a lot of candies and sweets that you were used to always having.
Uh, were you scared during that time?
Yes, we, after the war had been going on for a year, they came round to all the different homes, and in the back gardens, in the backyards as you call them, they built air raid shelters for us. And they were kind of half down into the ground. And so when the sirens went off, when there was a raid, we would go out and we would go down into the air raid shelter, and then we would wait for the all clear signal, which was another siren, but it was completely different to the first one you hear, and then we would know it was safe to come up. And one year, one of the German bombers crashed behind our house. We lived on the edge of the town, so right beyond us was fields, and one of their bombers crashed out there, and so we couldn't go down to the air raid shelter that night. And so we got under the table, the dining room table. I don't know why we thought that would be safe, but remember, when you do earthquake drill, you get under your desks. And so we spent the time during the raid under there. But every street had what we call the air warden. And the air warden would go around and he would knock on your door and would call to you and ask you if you were okay. So all during the raid, he would be going round up and down the street, making sure everybody was safe.
Who else was with you during that time?
My mother and my sister. And sometimes my granny was staying with us. So there were sometimes four of us in the home. My dad was away from home. He was in the Royal Air Force. And so he was serving his country. And so we were there alone at that time. We also, all the windows were covered in black so that lights couldn't be seen from the air. And so at a certain time of night, then we'd go into the blackout mode, and you try not to use your lights at all, but all the windows were covered with this black paper that was taped on so that light wouldn't show through them. And we were trying to confuse the enemy when the warplanes came over.
Did you ever, were you ever outside during when one of the air raids happened, not near your home?
Not very often. It was very difficult because you see all the street lights were out, so everything was in complete blackness, and you couldn't really use a flashlight or torch to find your way. So most people, there was like a curfew at night. They tried to be in their own homes by the time nightfall came. And we were lucky and were able to do that. We didn't have any emergencies that took us out, so we were able to do that. And I should mention too that the last couple of years of the war, I was going to school. And if there was a raid during the school hours, then we went out to what we call the Nissen huts. And they were like an air raid shelter, and the whole school would have to go out and wait there until the all clear signal came.
Did you ever have to do that?
Yes, once or twice we had to do that. But the bombers came over at night so that they figured they couldn't be seen. But they used to have huge spotlights that the ground troops would use that would light up the sky at night so that they could see when the bombers came in. Of course, you could hear them. Could hear the planes coming over. But of course, we lived near where there was an airport, and so a lot of our bombers were taking off, to go to Germany to do the same thing. So it was sometimes hard to determine which was coming. And that was the reason they had the air raid warnings. The sirens would go off. The siren is very similar to the siren that you have there in North Platte when there's a big wind in that.
Tornadoes.
A tornado, yes. The tornado signal, it's similar to the air raid siren too.
Did you ever come close to getting, did you ever come close to being injured at all or anything like that?
No, we were very, very lucky because we lived on the river, and so we were near the ports, and a lot of troops were shipped out from there, and provisions for the troops and that, and also ammunition and everything. So we did come under a lot of bombing at that time, and a lot of places and streets and homes around us were bombed. After the war was over, we used to play on the bombed sites. When I think back now, it must have been quite dangerous, but we were children and we didn't know any better. Until they were, the government finally got everything, so they cleared all the sites away, all the bomb sites. But for a while there, you could climb over all the bricks and the wreckage and everything that once were homes that were around us on the streets.
Did any of your friends ever get bombed? Did they ever?
Yes. Every now and then we had people that we were at school with whose homes were destroyed or bombed, and we didn't really know of any of them that were killed, but some of them lost mothers and aunts and uncles during the raids. Another thing that we couldn't get during the war that maybe you'd be interested in was clothing. And so the clothing was all made, it was called utility clothing. And it never had a name label in. I mean, you couldn't go and you couldn't buy Levi jeans.
The most scariest moment during the war?
I think every time that we had a bombing raid, it was scary because we didn't, you never knew if you were going to, if a bomb would drop on your home or what was going to happen. So just the continuation of the bombing raids, those were the scariest times that there could be. Sometimes it was so late into the night that the raids would come that in the air raid shelters they had bunks, bunk beds.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could lay down. And so we'd take our pillows down with us, and then we already had blankets in there. And then we'd lay down. So sometimes you slept through a raid, even though it was noisy and everything around you, because, after a few years, you became accustomed to it because it was just part of your life. So that's what happened there.
Did you know any families that were affected by the raids?
Yes. Some of the streets beyond us, they were bombed, the homes. None of my friends, I can't remember any of my friends that were killed or anything by them, but some of them did lose their mums. And of course, you know, a lot of them lost fathers in the war. The ones that were young families like we were lost their fathers in the war, but we were lucky that my dad made it through. I was going to tell you about the railings around the home. We had metal railings that went round our garden. And towards the end of the war, everybody had to give as much metal as they could to the factories so that they could make bombs. So a lot of people gave pots and pans were taken, you know, your metal ones. But the government and the city came round and took all the railings, cut all the railings off from the cement block. You know, there was a cement at the bottom that they were all stuck in, and they just chopped them right off and took all those away. And those railings were really fun when we were growing up, because we used to take a stick and run along the street across the railings, and it would go clickety, 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 click all down. So we were sorry to see them go, but we figured it was going for a good cause. Okay.
What was the celebration like?
The victory celebration was really wonderful, because it was such a joyous feeling, because it was a feeling of it's over with. Oh, thank goodness it's all over and done with, you know. We're going to be able to just live normal everyday lives. So it took a while for us to adjust. And we had street parties, and they'd set tables up all down the street and cover them with cloths. And then all the mothers baked and cooked with whatever they could get their hands on to do it, you know, because we still were rationed then. And we had a great big street party, and we all sat down to a meal at the tables. And then in the evening, the city put on a fireworks display, and we all went down to Queen's Gardens and stood and watched the firework display, and it was all wonderful. Another thing I wanted to mention was during all this time, the schools were still open, and everybody still, you know, we tried to keep life as normal as possible. So the children still went to school. And I can remember that after the war was over, a few months afterwards, Canada, the country of Canada, sent all the school children in England apples and a little bottle of apple juice. And at recess time, or playtime as we called it, we all went out, and normally we would get a little tiny bottle of milk. But that day when we went out, we each got half an apple, which we hadn't seen for a long, long while, and we each got a little tiny bottle of apple juice, and then we pushed a straw in it and drank it. And I can remember how delicious it tasted. So we were really grateful to the Canadian people for doing that for us, because the apple crop, you see, all the crops and that in England during that time were cut back, and we weren't able, you know, to get a hold of fruit like that. So that was the wonderful end to the war, and life wasn't quite normal for a few years, but then everything just got back to normal, and all the soldiers and airmen and everybody came home from the war, and families were all reunited, and it was a joyous time for us.
Okay, I think that's it.
Hey, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Bye.
Bye.